Welcome into the Awesemo UFC Strategy Show for UFC 267, which goes down on Saturday in Abu Dhabi. Early start time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, with your prelims main card, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, this fight card will air live on ESPN Plus. So, and Pete, I think we have to remind people, big cage on Saturday, something to kind of think about in terms of developing your lines. Of course, we'll be here over the next hour to break this one down for you. We are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. We'll give some Monkey Knife Fight picks later on in the show. But Pete, before we get even started, you know, we always talk about we love our screenshots. We got a good screenshot Saturday.
Yes, sir. We did. You know, congrats. We had a successful night for the team Awesemo. I love it. I love seeing that. Taking down, first place for the big GPP is fantastic. Congrats to you. Thank you for trusting us. Obviously you have to have some core plays, and then you have to sprinkle in some other low options that could possibly come through. Caceres was that guy, right? Like Caceres was the guy that kind of was the slate breaker.
Yeah, Deathflower 74 is the handle over on DraftKings. Had Vittori, Alex Caceres, Rodriguez, Ronda Marcos, Molina, and Mason Jones, who, man, that was a great fight. If you didn't chance to see Mason Jones, David Onama, that was a really good fight that those two guys put on there. But of course, we're here to break down UFC 267. We are headlined by two title fights. Main event, light heavyweight title fight, Jan Blachowicz defending his title against Glover Teixeira. Of course, as of doing this show, we only have pricing over on DraftKings, so we'll be talking nothing but DraftKings here. But of course, on Saturday morning, live before lock, we'll talk about the FanDuel pricing over there. $9,000 for Jan Blachowicz, $7,200 for Glover Teixeira. And Pete, as I've kind of thought about this fight, I really feel like this is a fight that's going to go 25 minutes. I feel like the key for Glover Teixeira is making this a grappling matchup, not making this a kickboxing matchup. Try to, basically use, get this fight up against the fence. What's your take on the fight?
I think it's a fantastic fight. It's kind of surprising that in 2021, we're having this matchup for the belt. I think that both fighters have made adjustments necessary for their careers. We've seen Blachowicz, start off his UFC career really not well at all, starting to go on a streak. The Polish power is a real thing. He's knocking people out. If he touches you, man, people go to sleep. And, Glover Teixeira, constantly counted out, has a grit like you wouldn't believe, has a well-rounded Brazilian jiu-jitsu, good wrestling, great ground and pound. And I think that's what really separates him from a lot of the pack in the division. It's just a matter of if Glover can wear the damage. We've seen, plenty of times where Glover gets rocked and hurt throughout fights. And I think going up against such a power puncher in Jan Blachowicz, he has to be very, very careful. I mean, he keeps his hands high, but sometimes some shots sneak through. And we've seen Glover Teixeira on some wobbly legs at times. So, I don't know if this actually goes the distance, to be honest. I think that, if it's a low volume affair, Glover can somewhat minimize mistakes. But, you go back and you look at all the times Glover has been knocked out or actually been rocked in fights, and it's, countless times. I think the pricing's very, very fair on this matchup of $9,000 and $7,200 respectively. I think Blachowicz at $9,000 is somewhat of a steal in a championship matchup. He's going to have to, either up his volume, defend some takedowns where he struggled at times early on in his career. And I think he started to really round out his wrestling, defensive skills. But I am siding with Jan Blachowicz in the matchup. I'll tell you what, if you look at this card from top to bottom, a lot of these underdogs can come through. So like this is probably the most talented stacked underdog slate we've seen in a very, very long time. So if you feel good about an underdog, take a shot on them. I feel like Jan Blachowicz is probably going to get rid of Glover Teixeira within 3 rounds or so. I think it could be, competitive at times, but I am siding with Blachowicz.
Yeah, I kind of was looking at it in terms of the prop bets of this fight, looking at that over 2.5 rounds, because I do think this fight is going to hit the third round. I don't expect that it's going to be a fight that does go, under 2.5 rounds. And looking at the over 2.5 right now, looking across the board, looks like I get about minus 120 right now. Some action over there. But this is going to be a fight that I think the longer it does go, the more it does favor Jan Blachowicz. But I like what you said there, Pete. I think up all throughout this card, there's some underdogs. I'm like, okay, you know what? when I'm looking at throwing some chances on some fighters, there's certainly some fighters in there. I don't mind getting to Glover Teixeira, even though I do like Jan Blachowicz to win the fight. My only concern with Glover is if it's a 25-minute decision, even though, yes, it's a great value over on DraftKings, kind of what it is in a 25-minute fight. What's the ceiling and what's the floor in a decision win for Glover?
Yeah, I would probably say that, stacking is out this week. We have so many amazing underdogs that can come through. Somebody's going to come through. Multiple people are going to come through. Stacking's just eliminated in my thought process. Glover needs to implement takedowns and try to really test the defensive skills of Blachowicz. Blachowicz needs to get a finish, I think, because a stand-up affair between these two, 5 rounds with probably no knockdowns or takedowns. I would imagine some stats would accrue, but he'd have to get him out of there at 9,000. I look at the rest of this card and I just see that you're going to have a 700 point optimal lineup. And, can Blachowicz get 120 in a 5-round decision? Probably not. I think he needs to knock him out, and I think he end up will.
Yeah, it should be a great matchup. And yeah, there are some underdogs, particularly in cash, that I'm really looking at this week. We'll talk about one of those here momentarily. Of course, appreciate everyone here on a Thursday afternoon, early Thursday show here. Of course, we got coverage for you all day long right here on the Awesemo YouTube channel. So stick tuned for NFL, NBA, and so much more coverage right here on the Awesemo YouTube channel. Of course, if you're not subscribed to Awesemo right here on YouTube, gotta do it. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. Just hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you know when a new show is live here on the channel. Of course, if you're not an Awesemo Plus member and you want to get a peek behind the paywall today's free premium data and tools are NFL Showdown top plays, NBA player projection, NHL ownership projections. Pete the Heat was telling me a little before the show, we were both in the same NBA GPP last night.
That's right.
As I was literally kind of, I was throwing a couple of darts out there, and LaMelo Ball definitely did not work out. Would have thought he was going to light the Magic up last night, but you got to check out the great tools we have over at Awesemo.com. It's the tools that I use every day in developing. This time of year, I'm pretty much all NBA and MMA. That's what I'm doing there. So you got to check out all the great tools we have over there at Awesemo.com. Now, the co-main event, interim bantamweight title matchup, Peter Yan taking on Corey Sandhagen, 8,800 for Yan, 7,400 for Sandhagen. Pete, you know what? I know you may not want to roster potentially a losing fighter when we're talking about 15 fight cards. If this thing goes 25 minutes, it would not shock me if potentially Corey Sandhagen finds his way into some winning lineups.
I mean, I don't know, man. This week, it's just how many talented underdogs there are. I think you're going to need 6 victors. I really do. 7,400, the price is absolutely ridiculously cheap for Sandhagen. I get what you're saying. I really like this fight. I think it's a fantastic matchup. I cannot wait to watch it. You have a very competitive fight between these two, and I think Peter Yan will have the wrestling advantage whenever he decides to. He has awesome trips and takedowns, and I think that could actually, show Sandhagen's Achilles heel, and that's been what's really, abandoned him throughout some of his matchups is his defensive flaws in the wrestling department. He's a fantastic striker. He's rangy for the weight class. But I think Peter Yan's volume, his aggressiveness, and just his well-rounded skill set, I think will be too much in this matchup. I get what you're saying. I don't mind a dog shot at 7,400 for Corey Sandhagen, but I think Peter Yan is going to be a champ for a very, very long time. I liked his prospect in the sport, and I like him even more till this day. I think that he's a smash play at 8,800. I'm actually surprised that he's not more expensive. So I think it's probably one of the best bargains at the upper echelon of the salary range.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting that Peter Yan is going to try to use his grappling this one. Now, the one thing is Yan does tend to get off the slow start, so I think that's something you can pay into it. And I saw some numbers on Twitter earlier this week. And by the way, a great Twitter follower, Numbers MMA, throws out some great stats out there. Most significant strikes land per minute from distance in UFC bantamweight history. Only 3 fighters have a better number than Corey Sandhagen. Sandhagen's number 7.31. The guys in front of him, Louis Smolka, Sean O'Malley, and John Albert.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird list, right? Like when, Louis Smolka's on the list, I kind of like, I don't know. I mean, stats can sometimes be skewed. I think that's an interesting stat for sure. He needs to fight at range. He needs to avoid getting, Peter Yan getting on the inside, but I think Peter Yan's just aggressiveness. He can walk him down, march him down. I wouldn't be surprised to see Yan get Sandhagen out of there. I do like Sandhagen overall. I thought he looked good in the Dillashaw fight. But again, it's the wrestling. It's the lack of wrestling, I should say. The lack of grappling skills in the Aljamain Sterling fight. Yeah, if it's just a striking affair, he has the tools, the explosiveness to get this done. So he's a part of the underdog pool for sure, but I'm leaning pretty heavily in the Petr Yan direction.
Here's the other number that MMA by Numbers pointed out. Petr Yan against 4 opponents who've averaged less than 10 distance strikes per minute. He has a 1.72 distance strike differential against 4 who have averaged greater than 10 in their career. It's only a 0.2 differential. Sandhagen, 16.35 attempts per minute. That's 34th best in UFC. And just kind of go deeper into those numbers, the opponents that Yan has gone against that bring more than 10 strikes per minute: Aljamain Sterling, Jimmy Rivera, Douglas Silva de Andrade, Jin So Sun. The one that are less than 10, Jose Aldo, John Dodson, Uriah Faber, Teruto Ishihara. I mean, look, I'm with you. I think Petr Yan is the right way to go. But if this thing, if Corey Sandhagen have it play on the feed, man, I think Sandhagen's got to be a guy in the underdog pool. And every week on this show, you talk about you got to be looking at your underdogs in the main event and co-main event.
Yeah, I mean, you prioritize main event, co-main event underdogs. Makes sense. I'm just really not buying it. I'm not. I'm kind of like blinded in the Petr Yan direction, and that's okay. If you feel a little bit more bullish about Sandhagen and think that he can spoil him, maybe. I just don't see it, man. I really don't. I think Petr Yan walks right through Sandhagen.
He should. I mean, look, Petr Yan is an incredible talent. Of course, you look at the fact of you only fought once in 2020, fought earlier this year, a fight that, look, if he doesn't land the illegal knee, he's on his way to probably stopping Aljamain Sterling. The fight was going very badly for Sterling at that point. And of course, the winner of this matchup will face Sterling in a unified title matchup sometime in 2022. Then we got a lightweight matchup between Dan Hooker and Islam Makhachev. Makhachev 9,600, Dan Hooker 6,600. I mean, look, there's not a lot of guys who are signing up to take on Islam. Dan Hooker's like, yeah, I'll sign up. And look, it's, at the end of the day, he's going to have to stop the takedowns here. It's a heavy price point on Islam in this matchup. But man, it's if you can find a way to squeeze him in your lineup. I mean, because of the takedowns, control time, he might be able to have the ability to rack up points, Pete.
You know what's crazy is I think I'm okay with getting away from him this week. Truthfully, I really do. It's only a 3-round fight. And I think that Islam Makhachev has showed some promise. If you think about the last fight against Thiago Moises, it was it ended in the 4th round because it was a main event. He only scored 117, and that's a lot, right? Like 117 is a lot, but you think about his style and how many takedowns he can possibly get in a matchup. I think he's overpriced. I think he's overpriced for a 3-round fight. And I think Dan Hooker's severely underpriced. I think Dan Hooker has all the skills to make this a very difficult fight for Makhachev. He's a very tall guy, excellent striker, definitely the better striker than Makhachev. You think that he can frustrate him from the outside. I think that his wrestling defense early on in this career was, lackadaisical, but I think it's improved, and we've seen him get some offensive takedowns. I don't think that he will go to that well, and he should not. He should avoid the exchanges as much as possible. He has a submission arsenal. I'm telling you, if Makhachev's cardio is not up to par, or what we're really seeing in MMA a lot now is if a wrestler just blankets an opponent and the other fighter is starting to land the more damaging strikes, or they're trying to be the more aggressive, and you're talking about a couple minutes of control time versus a little bit more damage, judges are starting to really sway in the direction of the damaging fighters. And I think it's tricky sometimes, but it also depends on who's judging the fight. I think that, Dan Hooker's way too cheap, 6,600, way too cheap. I will have him in there. I think in a loss, he could come through. I know I was just talking earlier about how Sandhagen probably in a loss doesn't. 6,600, the salary gap between them is just ridiculous. Makhachev's a stud. I just don't think that he's the same fighter that Khabib Nurmagomedov is. I think he's talented. I think he's dominant. I think he's very, very good. He has the submission skills to get Hooker out of there for sure. I just think he's too expensive given the rest of this, given the rest of this slate. I think there's too many good options. Like you talk about Chimaev at 9,500. I'd rather get to Chimaev.
Yeah, no, that's one. I don't know if you heard the emergency warning just go off my phone.
Yeah, I
Scared
thought it
the
was
living
me.
crap out of me.
Yeah, I thought it was me, man, because we've been losing power. We got crazy winds up here and trees falling down. So if I
Apparently,
happen to
there's
just
a tornado warning in my area. Apparently, so
well,
you know,
we'll prioritize life over Awesemo MMA DFS shows. So
yeah, so yeah, that definitely. I was like, what the. Oh man, sometimes it happens when you're sitting here in the office, but of course, we do appreciate everyone sitting here. Something we should note: Dan Hooker, 5-inch reach advantage in this matchup. Yes. He's got to keep this fight on the feet. I mean, it's we're not breaking any news here. I mean, I think everyone knows that.
I'll tell you right now, non-DFS related, I'm picking Hooker to win with my heart. Well, not even not taking logic into it at all. I think that like he has the skills to pull the upset. I really do. For DFS, he's just too cheap. That's basically my argument for there. I think he's too cheap given the matchup, given the durability. You think about how he fought Dustin Poirier. He's 6,600. That is like crazy, crazy cheap. And if you think about Onama last week, he was really, really cheap, and he had an extremely competitive fight against Mason Jones. And I thought that he was going to be on his way to being a part of an optimal lineup.
Yeah, no, it was a great performance that Onama had there. But the Hooker thing, I guess I can't get the knockout loss to Channel out of my mind.
Yeah, but Makhachev's not knocking him out.
No, he's not. But I just don't know if he's going to be able to stop the takedowns. That's my concern with it.
Right. I mean, that's fair, right? Like Makhachev's talented, but that's the one thing that's a difference for me is Makhachev's pace. He's very, very calculated. He waits back a little bit, and his lack of volume and lack of, like, we'll say, I don't know. There's no desire to finish the fight super early. He's not really a ground and pound specialist. He's a submission specialist, whereas Khabib was a ground and pound specialist. So that I think the lack of points given his salary is why I'm okay with being a little bit underweight to him.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Of course, this is the also MMA strategy shows. We're getting you ready for Saturday's UFC 267 when you want to get access to all the great premium tools and data over at Awesemo.com. You want to sign up for an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. And if you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum, you can take advantage of the deal we have going on right now. When you use the promo code MMA Strategy Show, that's one word, all caps, MMA Strategy Show, for 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And of course, if you just want an MMA weekly pass, those passes start as low as $295. I'll be put in my UFC Pro place here later on today. All the great tools, like the Top Fire tool, really is a tool that I'm always looking at, trying to figure out the leverage spots that we'll go to. And of course, the ownership projections that Alex puts together is a core part of my putting together. So be sure to use that promo code MMA Strategy Show if you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum for 25% off your first week. Next up, we got a heavyweight matchup of Alexander Volkov and Marcin Tybura. Volkov 8,900, Marcin Tybura 7,300. And this is another one that when I think about my underdog pool, Marcin Tybura is probably going to be in it. Obviously, the size and length of Alexander Volkov are some concerns for me, but at the end of the day, it's heavyweight MMA. If I want to take a dart, I'm always going to look at a heavyweight fight.
Yeah, it's a great logic behind that. Yeah, I think that heavyweight MMA and women's MMA is pretty volatile, and we always talk about making sure you have exposure to the underdog. And Marcin Tybura 2.0, I should say, he looks good. And as of late, he's on a run. We talk about multiple wins: Spivak, Grisham, Rothwell, Hardy, Harris. Like that's pretty good competition. And his well-rounded skill set is what really makes him such a live underdog. He's able to strike, he's able to grapple, he's able to wrestle, he's able to find finishes. And we've seen Alexander Volkov struggle in the takedown defensive department before, but I think the length can somewhat nullify that. And if you look at who Volkov's fight, I think it's really ballooned because of the Curtis Blaydes fight. Outside of that, he's fought legitimate competition, top end of the division, Cyril Gane, Overeem, Harris, Blaydes, Hardy. Like when he's on, he's on. And I think that he can make Marcin Tybura sit and duck at times, keep him at the end of his punches, pick him apart from range. I like Volkov in the matchup. I think that he's so heavy now compared to what he used to be. And that weight, I think, has served him well. He's able to put some real good pop behind his shots, more of a volume guy, but it really wouldn't surprise me to see him get Tybura out of there. 8,900, it's tough this week. You're going to have to prioritize certain fighters and, create groups over on Awesemo.com using the Fantasy Cruncher tool. I like Volkov in the matchup, but it's more like I'd say 80% of the time, I think probably 70% of the time, Volkov wins this matchup, but 7,300 for Tybura. He is too cheap given his well-rounded skill set and live dog capability in this given fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things with Volkov at that price point. I think you got to be kind of looking at the ownership angle. I mean, look, I'd much rather there's some 9,000 options. I'd rather just pay up to get to, especially with some of those fighters that have that ability to, with the takedown aspect. We're going to talk about Chimaev here in a moment, but really that's where you got to look at the ownership and maybe see, can you get a lever spot if you like the spot that Volkov is in there in terms of an ownership aspect. I think that's something to potentially look at in terms of that. Now, speaking of Khamzat Chimaev, first time back in a year, taking on Li Jialing. You got to pay a big price point here for Khamzat, 9,500, 6,700 for Jialing. I think this is a great test for Chimaev. I mean, in a way, I kind of wonder if the UFC is still kind of rushing him a little bit here. We saw after that tremendous run he went on last year on Fight Island that there was definitely a rush to get him in there against top 10 competition. But, as I really took a deeper dive into this fight, Pete, the thing that really stuck out to me is when Jialing has gone up against fighters who are going to grapple, we've seen him struggle in those matchups.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, Khamzat Chimaev is one of my favorite prospects in the entire sport. And I actually view him as a champ within the next 3 years. If everything keeps going the way it is, I really have high hopes for Khamzat Chimaev. If you look at Li Jingliang's, career, he was taken down 4 times by Neil Magny, twice by Jake Matthews, Frank Camacho, Bobby Nash, Anton Zafir. All these guys are able to land takedowns against them. And I don't think that's good when you're paired up against Khamzat Chimaev. Obviously, I'm a little worried about the layoff. I'm a little worried about the inactivity after being the most, active fighter out there for the given 6 months he was active in the UFC. Li Jingliang has fought the tougher competition. He's fought the more notable UFC names. I mean, just knocked out Santiago Ponzinibbio, and Ponzinibbio is a stud. Neil Magny, Zaleski dos Santos. I could keep going on and on. He's fought legitimate competition, but that does not mean that Khamzat Chimaev is not prepared for this. I think that no matter what, given his meteoric rise within the division, it was kind of inevitable that he was going to be paired up with a tough test. And this is a very tough test. If he goes through Li Jingliang, I'm telling you right now, if he goes through him like a hot knife through butter, it's over. I think he is able to, really contend for the title. And I think that he could be a champion within the next 3 years. So I love the price point on Khamzat Chimaev. I will be I'm not going to say underweight. I'll probably be even with the field because of his just amazing potential, his takedowns, his knockout ability. I mean, in his 3 UFC fights, he scored over 120 in each of them. Granted, they finished within the first 2 rounds. So what happens if he's unable to get Li Jingliang out of there? Does he really still pay off that ridiculous 9,500 price tag? I'm going to say, yeah, more times than not, he does. So I like him quite a bit. Jingliang's stupid cheap and is, one of the most live underdogs if he can connect some punches. But I'm weighing heavily on the Khamzat Chimaev side.
I mean, look, this is and look, I'm with you. I think it is play Chimaev and kind of, if you can fit him in your lineup, that's really the big question there.
Right.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that I will do is I'll go in the fantasy cruncher, and what I'll do is I'll just lock him in. And then I'll say, give me 100, give me how many lines, 20 lines, 100 lines, how many? Because then I just want to see what are the lines that get spit out and see, okay, by paying up for that, what's it going to do to the rest of my line construction? So that's something that I do in terms of going over on Fantasy Cruncher. My only 2 concerns with Chimaev heading into this one is first fight since all the medical issues he had with COVID.
Correct.
Of course, he briefly retired, and then, the dictator basically said, no, you're not retired. Mm-hmm. And then, the other aspect of it is we've not seen him deal with adversity. And so it's kind of a question of, that's always something you want to see out of a fighter. How do they handle adversity in a fight? How do they bounce back? You think about last night, Ray Cooper obviously has been in this game for a long time. He had to deal with some adversity and comes back and has a beautiful knockout to win $1 million. And, gotta say, I saw Dave Doyle tweet this last night. Why is everyone asking Ray Cooper to go to the UFC to take a pay cut?
Yeah, for real. I mean, if you are a fighter on the way up, if you have an avenue of making $1 million, I would much rather do that. You know what I mean? Ray Cooper, that was fantastic, and it just shows you how crazy MMA is at times. I am a little, I shouldn't say worried, but it's tough when I hear about how bad Khamzat's COVID situation was, and then the UFC basically got behind him and said, we're going to get you all the medical help you need. We're going to get you back to 100%. And then there was multiple times where he had to pull out of fights because he just did not either feel himself. He did not have, the best confidence given his performance in training or whatnot. But now we're here some time ago, and I'd like to believe that he's kind of patched those medical issues, and I think that Khamzat Chimaev, I think I'll be even with the field, and I think that he's going to have another breakout performance here. I'm just a little worried.
Then our opening matchup of the main card on ESPN Plus will be a light heavyweight matchup. Ankalaev taking on Oezdemir. Ankalaev 9,100. Oezdemir 7,100. Ankalaev is a interesting play for me this week.
Interesting as in how?
I think I'm going to be over the field on him as opposed to what we're currently seeing in terms of ownership.
I haven't even peaked that ownership yet. I can't wait to see it, but I really do like Ankalaev here. And I think that Volkan Oezdemir coming off that ridiculously bad knockout against that Yuri Prochazka, he's a fighter that goes for it, but I also worry about Volkan's cardio and Volkan's, striking defense. And I do view, Ankalaev as one of the best prospects in this division. I like him. I like the 9,100 price tag. You're going to have to get a little contrarian this week in certain areas and maybe not fading, but being a little underweight to like a Makhachev or Chimaev and going more towards an Ankalaev with the $400 or $500 savings. Maybe that's the route to go. I do like Ankalaev inside the distance. I think that he puts away Oezdemir.
I'm with you there as well. And the number I'm looking at. Just saying. You know the number I like to look at. Just saying. Yes. Ankalaev is going to be someone that I'm going to be looking at in terms of my GPP lineups. Next up, we got a female matchup, Amanda Ribas versus Verna Jandiroba. This is your favorite 8,200, 8,000 fight. I was actually surprised to see that Amanda Ribas is a favorite in this one.
I hate this fight because it's, we had such high expectations for Amanda Ribas because she looked really, really good. Now, was that based on skill or strength of schedule? Whenever you get a win over Mackenzie Dern, that's big because Mackenzie Dern's a huge name in the sport. But we can see now that Mackenzie Dern's not really the same level MMA fighter that she was for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor. And I think it's going to take some time and some adjustments to her style, really getting some better wrestling. But a fighter like Amanda Ribas able to somewhat defend and also counter some takedowns and land some of her own against Mackenzie Dern is what got her that victory. And now we're talking about, her past three fights, Randa Marcos, Paige Van Zandt, and Marina Rodriguez. The loss to Marina Rodriguez is, I can't get that out of my head of how much damage she took and also how much of a horrible call that was on the referee and officials' part of how she basically got knocked out twice. This salary range usually tends to make it into the optimal lineup, and this is women's MMA. I'm a little confused with this matchup, to be honest, because I think that Jandiroba has some fantastic jiu-jitsu skills, and because of her willingness to go to the mat, she's able to let her hands go, and that confidence in her ground game allows her striking to be a little bit more effective. And you saw that in her last fight against Murata, where she was able to just let her hands go and not worry if she gets taken down, if she brings her hips too far forward, whatnot. What are you going to do? I'm going to throw hands at you. And if you don't respect it, then I'm going to land my shots. And if you do start to respect it, I can snatch your hips and land a takedown a little bit easier. Maybe Jandiroba pulls this off, Jason. Maybe she does at 8,000. I'm kind of leaning in that direction.
Yeah, I'm leaning in the Jandiroba section as well. I mean, you look at the fact of her two losses in the UFC, Mackenzie Dern and Carla Esparza. I mean, Carla Esparza, she'll be fighting for a title we would expect sometime in early 2022. I just don't know if I really want to trust Amanda Ribas. I'm actually kind of surprised in this match. I thought they would have given her a little bit of a different opponent in terms of this one, but it's a fight that I was thinking about earlier today. I was like, man, do we have to prioritize this fight just because of salary?
I don't know, because do we see a finish coming? That's basically what we have to put our finger on.
I think if it comes, it comes in third round.
Okay. I think that Amanda Ribas, surrounded by talented fighters down American Top Team. She's fantastic in all areas. The striking defense, she was cracked and wobbled and knocked out in her past fight. So a fighter like Jandiroba, who's really, you probably won't respect Jandiroba's hands, but she's going to try to test that chin of Amanda Ribas. And that's what me as a coach, I would say is, hey, let's test that chin of hers, get her hands up, and then we can shoot on the hips a little bit easier. So I'm siding with Jandiroba, but it's weird, right? Because we have so many fights, so many amazing matchups. I see a lot of finishes on this card. So if they don't score over 100 points, are either of them optimal? No, I don't think so. So I'm leaning a little bit in the Jandiroba direction, but I think that I don't really see this being an optimal fight.
No, I mean, it's for me, it more comes down to the price point. And I just wonder when I start doing, my mass crunches of how much this fight is going to come up in my crunch course. So we are sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight. With Monkey Knife Fight, you are in charge of their player props. Of course, you can start over at monkeyknifefight.com. When you sign up, be sure to use that promo code Awesemo for an instant first match deposit of up to $100. But let's take a look at the main event and co-main event over at Monkey Knife Fight. Total strikes landed. Blachowicz 108.5, Glover 62.5.
I'm saying less on both. I think that there is a way, but I don't really view Glover taking that many shots from Mr. Polish Power. I see less on both.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably agree with you there. It's just because if we're talking Blachowicz landing over 100 strikes, I think at some point he's going to drop them, so it probably goes a little less there. And then in the co-main event, you got Jan and Sandhagen. Jan 126.5, Sandhagen 89.5. It's a big number, but it's a bantamweight fight. You could see a ton of volume in this one.
Yeah, we're going to say more for both. At least I am. I'm going to say more for both. I think that given the weight class and the 5 rounds, I think the totals are going to get ballooned. Sandhagen's amazing. He really is. So he's going to test Peter Yan, but I think Peter Yan is going to be able to walk through him.
Well, I'll tell you this. I look on the screen here. People are hammered in the under. The less on Jan Blachowicz, number down to 101.5, Glover 58.5. And look, I did my sheet about 3 hours ago. That's one of the things I tell you about over at Monkey Knife Fight.
Yeah,
is you got to get on these lines early on in the week because people are going to start hammering them. So you want to try to get the best number you can. I mean, look, if you think that number is going to be greater than 102, 103, maybe you just kind of wait and see if that line goes down more and more. That's one of the things I always say with Monkey Knife Fight. You got to take advantage over there. Let's move on to the next matchup on the card, which is Ramos and Tygurov. 7,900 for Ramos, 8,300 for Tybura. What is your thoughts on this one, Pete?
Zubaira Tukhugov, he has takedown ability. He definitely does. He's a good wrestler. Lackadaisical striking. I think that anybody that can test his cardio at times can give him some problems. He's fought some good competition. I'm just not really, I don't know. He's not really living up to the hype for me. I think a fighter in Ricardo Ramos, a guy that has a well-rounded skill set, good striker coming from a solid camp, has good offensive takedowns. Hopefully he can defend some takedowns. I think he can make this ugly. And I think this could be another situation of the blanket versus the damage. And I think that Tukhugov is going to look to blanket Ramos at times, but Ramos is going to be active and start to land some better strikes or start to really push the pace. So I'm going to take an underdog shot on Ricardo Ramos. Outside of that loss to Lerone Murphy, I think that he's looked really, really good. Obviously, he lost in Nurmagomedov, but I'll say I think that he has a well-rounded skill set and can test most fighters in the division. He's 15-3 overall. I'm going to side with him at 7,900. I like the little discount. Not really buying the hype on Tukhugov, but if Tukhugov is able to survive or somewhat develop a better game plan, I think that you could see a sneaky total at 8,300 given his takedowns, but it's the lack of striking volume that really does it for me because in a draw against Lerone Murphy, landed 6 takedowns, only scored 55. So if you got that victory, it'd only been 85 points, but has one knockout win against Aguilar, scored 121 points. I don't really foresee that happening again. So I'll be underweight to Tukhugov.
Big Money NJ, appreciate you in the super chat. Also, Samuel, appreciate you as well. We'll get to your questions at the end of the show. Do want to try to we got 15 fights, try to get all these fights in here before we get out of here on this edition of the Strategy Show. Of course, myself and Pete will be back here Saturday morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time for Live Before Lock. You got Kopylov and Duraev 9,200, 7,000 for Roman. Let me just say, I think that obviously people are going to look at the favor in this one. Mm-hmm. Do you give Roman a 20% chance?
Yeah, I do. I think that he was a highly touted prospect outside the UFC. Came into the UFC against Carl Roberson, and Carl Roberson looked good, able to land a takedown, and it ended up, being able to submit him. Kopylov, I don't think showed his true skill set in that matchup. Could have been UFC octagon jitters. Who knows? Obviously, he is pretty young in the sport. But I really do like Albert Duraev here in this matchup. I thought that he looked amazing on the Dana White's Contender Series. Got a early finish, 3 minutes in the first round, submission neck crank over Cal Bittencourt. And even outside the UFC, Duraev's been a guy that I thought was going to get catapulted into the UFC somewhat immediately. I like him here in this matchup. I do think that Kopylov is going to be better than what he showed in his debut. If he is not, then I would probably label him somewhat as a bust into the UFC. He has skills, and I think he's starting to really mature into his body a little bit. I think he was relatively immature in his debut and kind of came into the UFC a little too early against pretty tough competition. Carl Roberson. Say what you want about Carl Roberson, but to debut against him in the UFC is a tough task. I'm going to side with Duraev, 9,200. I think he's a sneaky play. Could have some sneaky ownership given, you talk about Chimaev and Makhachev, all these, high 9,000 options. This could be a guy somewhat flying under the radar that could, have an amazing score in a dominant win.
Next up, we got Dos Santos and Dennis. Dos Santos, 8,500. He's been around the UFC for some time now. Yeah. And then his opponent here, 7,700 on DK. Obviously, tell me a little bit about his opponent, Pete.
Yeah, I'll say Bernard Saint-Denis is, he's talented. He really is. I think that, Zaleski Dos Santos has fought obviously the better competition and has 30 fights and been in the UFC for quite some time. Saint-Denis is a submission guy, looking to snatch up arm triangle chokes, arm bars, and he likes to target the neck. And I like guys that try to capture the neck because that's something that occurs a lot when fighters get tired. They start to get desperate and they start to leave their neck out there. I don't really foresee Zaleski Dos Santos leaving his neck out there. I mean, he is a BJJ black belt and has, multiple submission wins and knockout wins. He was submitted back in 2013 via rear naked choke. So that is a little interesting if he's not really the same fighter he used to be, but I'll have to side with the veteran here in Zaleski Dos Santos. I like him. I don't know at 8,500 how much I like him because in some wins it's been 70 points, 85 points. There's better options probably. And I do think that Saint-Denis is a guy that, given correct matchups, could actually have some amazing performances. I just think this is a lot to handle in your first UFC fight. And what happens? Well, how does he look in rounds 2 and 3 if he's unable to get an early finish? So I will be siding with Zaleski Dos Santos. I think that his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is going to keep him out of danger, and I think he's obviously the better striker of the two.
Next up, we got Shamil and Mihail. Shamil, 8,400. Mihail, 7,800.
God, I hate this fight. Man. Gamzatov, a guy that, I don't know, somewhat underwhelming, scored 60 points in his debut against Klidson Obreo. Marches forward, likes to throw strikes. On the regional scene, he does mix in some takedowns, and I think that can be interesting. It's not really like his ace up his sleeve. It's kind of just like if it's there, he'll take it at an opportune time. Oleksiejczuk is one of the most inconsistent guys ever that I can really remember. Some moments he looks like a guy that can be contending for the belt, and some moments it looks like a guy that trains only one facet of his game, and his takedown defense is always lacking, it seems. I thought that he made some strides. He has the better striking, probably the better hands of the two, I'll say. The kick advantage will probably go to Gamzatov, just throw some good round kicks at times. Oleksiejczuk's volume aggressiveness and finishing ability is going to make him a popular underdog at 7,800 against a relatively underwhelming fighter in Gamzatov. But I'm going to temper expectations still. I'll have exposure to Oleksiejczuk, but I still think a guy that can, walk you down in Gamzatov and mix in takedowns when he needs to. I think that he can actually, pull off the victory here. This is one of my least favorite fights on the card, probably just because I don't trust either one of these guys. So I do view this fight as a GPP fight, but one that I'm not really comfortable targeting either one of them, given the volatility.
So if we're keeping track, we've got two fights. Pete is not exactly high on, the other one being Jandiroba and Ribas. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. I feel like it's weird because they can be competitive at times, and they can, their strengths can somewhat nullify each other at times. And it just, I label it ugly. And if I label a fight ugly, I'll probably, temper expectations and somewhat minimize exposure if I'm a safe player. And I'm a safe player for the most part. If I want to be ridiculous and risky, then these ugly fights that I'm branding, I'd probably be a little bit more aggressive on.
Yeah, man. Look, you saw it last week. If you were aggressive and went with someone like a Bruce Leroy, a Ronda Marcos. I mean, look, I picked Ronda Marcos to win last week. I didn't think she was going to be optimal.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, man, that was awesome. Awesome call with that. I thought that there was a path, but when I saw her score, I watched the fight and then I saw her score. I'm like, yeah, she's probably going to get, I don't know, let's say 88 points, maybe 90 points. And I saw her score. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. She was awesome. She looked great. She might have looked career best.
But that's how you separate yourself, especially in these big GPPs. And, it's always, my mindset of when I'm playing cash, as opposed to GPP, is going to be different. Cash, I'm looking for more of a safer lineup.
Yeah.
Or these GPPs, especially you're in these contests. I've got 20,000 entries. It's a multi-entry contest. You just know you're going to have to differentiate yourself somewhere in that equation, especially when we're talking about MMA. You really got, I think you got to look at is who are those fighters 7,500 and below that you say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take a chance on those fighters. I mean, I think that's going to be easy this week to say Corey Sandhagen, 7,400, Glove Teixeira, 7,200, because they are in 5-round matchups.
Right. I mean, for me, right, I try not to predict scores so much because that's very difficult to do. I try to predict outcomes. And, you saw that Reyna Marcos had a path, to a victory. And if you were just a little bit heavier on her because you had that, inkling where you think that she could come through and you had exposure to her, obviously you did well. Who would have really predicted 100-point performance? I don't think too many people.
Of course, one of the things that we always mention, love seeing those screenshots after fights are over. We mentioned about right at the beginning of the show, Deathflower 74 taking down first place last week in the DraftKings GP, walk away with $100,000. And man, I'll just say that, set some money aside.
Yeah.
Probably set about 40% of that money to the side because Uncle Sam is going to come calling at some point. Of course, if you want to get in the Awesemo Hall of Fame, the first thing you got to be doing is you got to be rocking that Awesemo avatar. You can get that over at awesemo.com/avatar. Place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5,000 contestants. Tweet your wins to at Awesemo HOF. You'll win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Only one free month can be awarded to a user per calendar year. Of course, right at the top, got our guy, I'm sure, taking out $100,000 there in the NBA contest. By the way, that's also free content over at awesemo.com. Adam's deeper dive article every day in the NBA. You got to check out that great content there. Also, you got to look at T.O. Deck taking down with the Colt there, having the same lines as Steve Buzzard had there. Also in the mini max there, Milk 24 coming in there as well. So you see all the screenshots there up on the screen. So always love seeing those wins over there, and hope to see your wins on Saturday early afternoon. See, I'll be in the air on a plane as the main event and co-main event are going. So when I land New Orleans, I want to see my Twitter timeline flooded with screenshots.
Yeah, for real. Damn. Adam took down 100K last night. Wow. That's a hell of a lineup. I'm looking at it right now. That is fantastic. Congrats to him. Yeah, I love seeing the screenshots. We love seeing your guys, succeeding and all that stuff. It's cool. It'd be nice to hit a little 100K though. I gotta tell you, Jason, we got to hit that 100K. Tyler, we got to hit that 100K.
Yeah. As my wife wants to get our kitchen redone, that would help out a lot. That would pay for the kitchen remodel.
For sure.
Next up, we have got Makwan Amirkhani taking on Lerone Murphy. Murphy, one of those 9,000 ops this week, 9,300. Amirkhani, 6,900. Tough spot here for Amirkhani.
I think so too. Like Lerone Murphy and Hamza Chimaev will probably be two parlay pieces for me. And anytime that you can combine what I'll say is relatively safe fighters or relatively safe picks, you're not going to get the best odds, but you're going to get an okay parlay, which is what I like. And it's okay to be a little risky at times, but I think a guy in Lerone Murphy's a style that's somewhat of a nightmare for Makwan or Amirkhani. Yes, Lerone Murphy was taken down 6 times against Zuberi Tukhugov. But outside of that, when he's faced off against guys that are so willing to take him to the ground and trying to really get desperate at times for takedowns, he's able to punish them. I mean, look what he did to Ricardo Ramos. Douglas Silva de Andrade took him to the mat, but getting a win over Douglas Silva de Andrade, I think, is still notable even at this day and age. I really do. I think Lerone Murphy, just on that bully style, can somewhat make Makwan Amirkhani the nail in this situation. And I think Lerone Murphy's going to be the hammer in this fight. I think Makwan Amirkhani probably had better matchups. And I think that, getting takedowns, a lot of takedowns against Camuela Kirk, he goes crazy early on with so much offensive takedowns and offensive grappling that he exhausts himself. And that's where you see a second or third round, knockout possibly coming for Lerone Murphy. Yes, he has been pretty durable, but the exhaustion and just the amount of damage that he does wear at times is why I'm siding so much with Lerone Murphy. And I think a guy that can be, at 9,300, it's tough to really advocate for him given, Hamzat, Makhachev, Duraev, all these other amazing studs at this price range. But Lerone Murphy's very, very sneaky. And I think that he can get him out of there probably in the second or third round. So I'm siding with him significantly, but there are tons of good 9,000 options. So if you say you like Hamzat more, I don't blame you.
Next up, we've got Hugh and Petroski. Petroski, 8,600, 7,600 on the other side of the fight. Petroski, of course, we saw on The Ultimate Fighter. And now in this spot here, do you like the favorite?
Nope, I do not. And the reason I don't like the favorite in this situation is I would label him untrustworthy. And even if going back to The Ultimate Fighter, you look at his gas tank, it's somewhat suspect. He exhausts himself. He kind of reminds me a lot of Amirkhani. Obviously, a lot of, weight difference between the two, but how amazing they are in the wrestling and grappling department and how desperate they can get at times shooting takedowns and seem lost on the feet at times. And then come rounds 2 and 3, they're fatigued. Wrestling's exhausting. It really is. It's one of the most exhausting things you can do. But it's the fighters that can pace themselves and fighters that can really take their foot off the gas pedal and apply it when they need to is what separates a lot of fighters. A guy who just acts like it's a 1-round fight is somewhat volatile. And Petroski at 8,600 could go out there and walk right through Yaozong. Yaozong's the wild card of the week. We don't really know a lot about him. He was supposed to fight, coming off of a massive weight cut, and that fight ended up getting scrapped. But I do think that Yaozong in this weight class can pose some problems for people. The people I'm saying that he can pose problems for are the people that are somewhat sitting ducks because they're exhausted. So a fighter like Andre Petroski, if he's able to just give a little resistance to some takedowns and make Petroski work, I think that he's the better striker of the two. He has some good hands, obviously relatively green, 3-2 overall. His takedown defense looked a little suspect, and his submission defense did not look good early on in his career. There's so many unknowns that it's not a confident pick, but I'm going to say that Yaozong is going to pull off the upset. And it's more so of fading Petroski than really on anything I've seen from Yaozong, because in the Gilmore fight, I was like, man, if Gilmore is able to somewhat turn things around, like Petroski looks like he could basically, lose the fight for himself. And that's the problem. So I'm siding with Yaozong, 7,600, not a confident play by any means, but definitely, in GPP consideration, especially for my underdog selections.
Magomed and Demir 8,700, Magomed 7,500. What's your take?
Amazing skills between both of these guys. Demir is amazing. Mustafaev is amazing. I don't know, man. I really don't know how to side with this. Demir is very good, but Mustafaev is able to really, threaten people on the feet. More of a KO or finished guy, or bust. Can he really get Demir out of there? I'm probably going to lean in Demir's, corner, but this is again another fight of mine, another fight on this card that I really don't have a strong lean one way or another. I don't really like it for GPPs. I think they can negate each other at times, and it could end up resulting in a low score. So I'm okay being a little underweight to this fight, but I will be leaning in Demir's side. I think the takedowns could possibly be the difference maker here. Mustafaev can get takedowns himself. He scored 8 against Brad Riddell, but Brad Riddell's a striker. I don't really view, his takedown prowess to be the same in this matchup against Ismagulov.
Opening fight of the night, we've got a 9,400 option, a 6,800 option. Do we got to prioritize the first fight of the night, Pete?
I don't know. I'll say that 9,400 is a ridiculous price tag for Ulanbekov. Ulanbekov, he didn't really live up to the hype in his debut against Silva, but it's also starting to show that Silva is a little bit more talented than what a lot of people would like to imagine. He's a tough debut, a debut fight for anybody. Now I think he's going to get a much easier fight against Nascimento. I've seen Nascimento on his back at times, and I think that Ulanbekov landing 5 takedowns against Silva, you have my attention. Can he get him out of there? He's a sleeper for sure, 9,400. I'm siding pretty heavily with Ulanbekov, but on the feet, his defensive skills are somewhat, uninspiring. I think that he can get hit with shots. If Nascimento is able to just get aggressive and throw caution to the wind, we could be looking at a guy that maybe from a live betting perspective could rock him a little bit and give us a little bit better odds for Ulanbekov. But I think the more well-rounded fighter is Ulanbekov, and I'm going to side with him in the matchup. There's just so many 9,000 studs out there that I don't really know if I want to get to them.
Of course, we get some rapid fire questions before we get out of here. Of course, coming up next is the NHL Strategy Show. So keep it locked here to Awesemo.com, and be sure to be subscribed also right here on YouTube. Got a ton of great programming for you. As I look down, we've got you locked and loaded all day leading up to the NFL Showdown show, leading into tonight's NFL game. We also got the NBA coverage as well. So keep it locked here all day long. Let's hit up Samuel's, his usual questions. So we'll do a little rapid fire here. Let's first start off top 2 cash plays. Chimaev would be my number 1 cash play, and my number 2 cash play might be Ankalaev.
Okay, I like Laurel Murphy too. I think it's like a 3-way tie.
In terms of GPPs, I think you got to be looking at the co-main event. I would be looking at Peter Yan in the co-main event, especially if he can go down that takedown route. And I would also put Chimaev in that list of top 2 GPPs.
I love it. I do like it.
MVP, man, there's a couple that I really look at. I look at Ankalaev. I look at Chimaev. I look at Yan. And maybe Laurel Murphy as kind of that under the radar MVP champion type play.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. We're kind of on the same page with these 9,000 and high end options. I think they all are live to get finishes in dominant performances. So that's why we're really prioritizing those fighters.
Fights to be part of the optimal lineup. I'd be fairly surprised the co-main event's not in the optimal lineup.
Yeah, the pace of it's crazy. I'd have to say the co-main event's going to be in it. I think the Chimaev Jingliang fight's going to be in the optimal lineup, given just the aggressiveness of both fighters. Outside of that, it gets a little ugly. It gets a little weird. You talk about the Laurel Murphy and Amirkhani fight, just the pace of that, Petroski and Yaozong, the volatility of both of those fighters. I'd probably say Petroski and Yaozong's another one that I would start to prioritize.
Favorite inside the distance fights for me, I would go Chimaev, Jingliang, Ankalaev, Oezdemir, and I was going to throw a third one in there, Blachowicz, Teixeira.
Yeah, I would agree with all those, man. You're on the money. I think Blachowicz gets Teixeira out of there. Outside of that, I see some decisions. So I'm interested to see what this line is going to be for finishes.
All right. Sam sets his number. First off, Sam, just going to let you tell you, man, you got to put a 0.5 after the number. You got to give the half because that, he sets his number at 7. I would set the number at 8.5.
Bro, that can't be a tie. What are you doing, Sam? You're supposed to, again, you hear Marty, you're upsetting Marty in the background. So what are you setting it at?
8.5.
8.5, brother. Man, 8.5.
Tyler's giving me the over 8.5.
I think everybody naturally wants to hit the over, and I'll probably agree with that. I'll say over. I'll say 9.
But of course, that is going to do it for this edition of the Awesemo MMA Strategy Show. We'll be back on Saturday morning, early showtime, 9:30 a.m. each time, as lock is at 10:30 a.m. So make sure you remember that one, early lock time on Saturday. So that's going to do it for us. As of course, the NHL Strategy Show. Tyler, I have no idea what you're saying to me. Tyler's saying something to me.
Straight fight picks.
Straight up fight picks. I'll go quickly down mine. Blachowicz, Jan, Makhachev, Volkov, Chimaev, Ankalaev, Jandiroba, Ramos, Duraev, Dos Santos, Gamzatov, Murphy, Petroski, Ismagulov, and I'll go Tiger in the opening one.
All right. This is with my heart, non-DFS related. I'm going Blachowicz, Jan, Dan Hooker, Volkov, Chimaev, Ankalaev, Jandiroba, Ramos, Duraev, Zaleski, Gamzatov, Murphy, Yaozong, Ismagulov, and Ulanbekov. Man, my pronunciation is getting pretty good for some of these names.
Well, we're going to have probably a lot more Abu Dhabi cards with what's going on here starting November 8th. So that is going to do it for the Strategy Show. We will talk to you on Saturday. Of course, be sure to give us a follow on Twitter. I'm at Jason_Floyd. He's at Pete the Heat MMA. Of course, also be sure to follow Awesemo on Twitter at Awesemo_com. So until Saturday, this has been the Awesemo MMA Strategy Show. Have a good day, and we will talk to you on Saturday morning. See you.